John Tusa introduces history in the making with the Hong Kong handover.
On a note of high emotion, the last Hong Kong governor's flag has been lowered, folded and taken away. And the governor's car has left the gates of Government House for the last time. In torrential rain, British military pipes and bands have sounded their last notes and marched off the parade ground. But Britain is leaving the territory with a promise: we will not forget you.
Now, Hong Kong people are to run Hong Kong. That is the promise, and that is the unshakable destiny.
Britain is part of Hong Kong's history, and Hong Kong is part of Britain's history. We are also part of each other's future. We are confident that the ties between us will not only endure, but will continue to develop.
Hello from Hong Kong to viewers around the world. A century and a half of British rule will end peacefully in less than an hour's time. To underline that fact, a further contingent of 500 troops of the Chinese People's Liberation Army crossed the border just 2 hours ago. And now 2 formal events will symbolize the end of the direct British involvement in running Hong Kong. The highest-ranking Chinese leaders will meet their British counterparts to mark the midnight hour of transition. From one point of view, Britain hands back sovereignty over Hong Kong. From another, China recovers what should never have been taken away. One ceremony, 2 interpretations. Earlier this evening, the leaders arrived at the Hong Kong Convention Center for a huge banquet leading up to the actual handover. Among the early arrivals, Margaret Thatcher, Lady Thatcher, signatory of the joint declaration that started it all. And then the present-day figures, the Prince of Wales, the soon-to-be ex-Governor Chris Patten, and the Prime Minister Tony Blair. All are now gathering at the scene of the actual handover itself. Let's join Brian Hanrahan.
And the guests are now starting to filter through into this great hall at the other end of the building where the transition of power will take place. China had originally wanted almost no ceremony at all, the equivalent of going into an estate agent's office and handing over the keys. But instead they've been persuaded that they ought to hold this solemn ceremony in front of the world. There'll be guests from every continent, foreign ministers, there'll be the international organizations, the UN Secretary General, Kofi Annan will be here. But most important of all, it's the only event at which the British and the Chinese leaders will be present together. So far, the Chinese have pointedly stayed away from all the British events. The British are leaving immediately after this one, and they are not going to attend any of the Chinese events later this evening. But they will be here at the midnight hour to watch this solemn bargain in which Hong Kong and China have struck over the future, in which China and Britain have struck over the future of Hong Kong. They'll all be here then in about an hour's time.
On several occasions today, I've mentioned the overlap of cultures that we've experienced in Hong Kong. But this perhaps beats them all. Alongside the quay here at Tamar lies Her Majesty's yacht. And in the main arena, where earlier this evening there was a stirring final parade by Hong Kong's British forces, where the British and Hong Kong flags were lowered, there's now a canto pop concert, where there was torrential rain for the British farewell. There are now clearing skies and a freshening wind. In about an hour and 20 minutes' time, after the official handover. His Royal Highness Prince Charles and Chris Patten and his family will be coming back here to board Britannia for their final departure from Hong Kong in passage to Manila. The Royal Yacht, with her escort vessels, HMS Chatham, and the 3 remaining ships of the Hong Kong squadron, will head out into one of the busiest waterways in the world. Out past the convention centre, where Britain's role in Hong Kong is about to be brought to an end, as Hong Kong turns to its own entertainments, Britain will sail away.
The countdown to handover. All Hong Kongers debate China's intentions towards them. Do they mean what they say? Do they understand what they promised? Now, the case of the Legislative Council, or LegCo, is the crucial case in point. Chris Patten introduced an element of direct elections for the council. The Chinese said he was breaking agreements and called him a snake and a prostitute for his pains. They then appointed an interim LegCo. The democratically elected councils excluded themselves. But the Chinese have promised further elections in a year's time. But they'll be held in such a way that they probably favour parties backing the Beijing line. And that's why LegCo is the scene of protests by Hong Kong's Democrats tonight. For all they know, these may be the last they can ever hold here. Joy Shan Lam is outside LegCo.
Thank you, John. Behind the LegCo building in Chater Garden, the Association for the Celebration of the Reunification for Hong Kong has organized a celebrational event which is purely entertainment and mainly Chinese traditional arts, such as young girls from mainland China doing fan dances and kung fu masters doing their performances. And that has been organized by Jiang who is the leader of the pro-Beijing DAB party, and businessmen such as Henry Fok and Raymond Chen. And in contrast to that is the Democratic Party, whose platform we see here in the background. They have organized many speakers to speak to the public, who are giving very good responses tonight. Right now they have someone doing chants that are fairly critical of the Beijing government, and they're being quite outspoken. All this leads up to a speech that Martin Lee is going to make around midnight tonight, supposedly on the balcony of the LegCo building. A third group, which is an alternative celebration of the handover, has been organized by The Frontier, a women's liberation group, and various universities. And that has been fairly educational in the sense that it's been encouraging people in the public who've never spoken out before to express themselves tonight. And the public has been given the platform themselves. So far we've seen quite a few policemen standing by. Earlier on tonight, there were about a dozen policemen helping the Democratic Party setting up their platform right here behind us. The events themselves are fairly well organized, all 3 of them, but there is a sense of chaos around here because there's lots of tourists all dressed up, many locals, and a lot of media and their equipment, and lots of umbrellas as well, although the rain has been dying down.
The unscheduled part of this evening's events, and we'll be keeping a close eye on those both before and after midnight. Now, in Beijing, there's no doubting the importance being attached to the next few minutes. This is China's appointment with history, and the political machine there isn't missing any opportunity to ram home that fact. So let's catch up with Humphrey Hawksley in Beijing.
For about the past hour, there have been a massive display here in Tiananmen Square. There are choral patriotic songs like that you see going on here. And the buildings around the square, these are the communist buildings, are illuminated with red lanterns and red flags. At 10 o'clock tonight, there was a firework display which marked this, and the mayor of Beijing gave a statement basically saying the return of Hong Kong marked the unifying and modernization of China. On the stroke of midnight, the digital clock, these huge red numbers, will fall to 0. There will be another firework display, and then the celebrations will continue on until dawn, when the Chinese military, on the first day of control over Hong Kong, will raise the national flag here in Tiananmen Square.
Humphrey Hawksley in Beijing, where the feelings are wholly official and wholly uncomplicated. In Hong Kong, they remain complicated, contradictory and confusing, buoyed for the moment by the experience of success. This is the place where it's been said you can have an idea in the morning, register a company at noon and start making money in the afternoon. If ever the words opportunity, enterprise and endeavor meant anything, they mean it in Hong Kong.
A kiss of the hand may be quite continental, but diamonds are a girl's best friend.
Hong Kong, with probably more millionaires per square mile than anywhere else on Earth. More glamour than Bond Street and Fifth Avenue rolled into one.
But square cut or pear shape, these rocks don't lose their shape. Diamonds are a girl's best friend.
And at the heart of it all, Mr. Sammy Chow, the epitome of Hong Kong enterprise, selling expensive jewels to expensive ladies. Yet 48 years ago, Sammy Chow and his family arrived in Hong Kong with 2 suitcases and the clothes they stood up in, fleeing their hometown of Shanghai as the communists took control.
When we moved here, our hearts really not really settled down in Hong Kong. We've been thinking always, like going back to Shanghai or moving to other countries. I think Hong Kong is a very quiet city, not like Shanghai where my home is. But then everybody finds a job, then so we settled down. Yes.
In British Hong Kong, the refugees found stability, rule of law and a commitment to laissez-faire government. The business acumen of the Shanghai traders and a willing refugee workforce created a potent combination. International events did the rest.
The real big change, I think, for Hong Kong happened at the time of the Korean War. There was an UN embargo on China, and hence, basically, at that time, Hong Kong was completely cut off from its hinterland. Because of that, Hong Kong basically had to find another existence. We could no longer conduct our traditional entrepot trade. And then what we did from that time on, and for the following 20, 30 years, was in fact to create a manufacturing center in Hong Kong.
In the Hong Kong of today, the economy of the 50s and 60s of cheap clothes and plastic toys is a distant memory. But its very success made it increasingly uncompetitive with the taige economies of the region, and so began its second transformation.
What happened in 1979 was that we took our manufacturing base and started rationalizing that with southern China. And what we did was to retain the high value added front end and the back end of those manufacturing processes and move the labor intensive middle portion across the border into southern China. I believe Hong Kong people are unique. I think we're totally bicultural. We feel just as comfortable in London or in New York as we do in Guangzhou or in Beijing. We develop the vitality to keep on renewing ourselves, constantly. And that I think is a very, very important aspect of what makes Hong Kong tick.
50 years of hard work and acumen pay rewards. With a string of racehorses, the one-time refugee Sammy Chow now indulges in the sport of kings. And on the aptly named Carry On 97 ride the hopes of more than just the punters on a horse race.
Come on, a little more. Oh, second. It came second. Not bad. All right. Hope next time we do better.
I think he probably will. From tomorrow, Mr. Sammy Chow and millions like him will not live in a British colony or dependent territory. Hong Kong will be a special administrative region of China, where according to a Chinese state decree, the socialist system and policies will not be practiced. It will have a high degree of autonomy and will be ruled by law. Private ownership of property will be respected and freedom of speech is guaranteed. Hong Kong's 6 million Chinese differ from their mainland cousins in the most fundamental way. They're free. People can speak out. There's a free press, freedom in academic life, and freedom of travel. Coupled with a strong rule of law and an efficient and honest civil service, Hong Kong has become stable and prosperous.
I believe that to the extent that we are China's window on the rest of the world, that we are a source of influence for the good. And I believe that there are many, many areas in which we can provide the expertise and help bring China's own professional standards in many areas up to the world standard. But over time, provided China continues to grow and to prosper, I believe that our differences, particularly in our political systems, in our values, in our concepts, will tend over time to close rather than to widen.
Red chips are the hottest shares these days as scarlet fever hits Hong Kong. Investors are eager to buy a piece of one of the biggest Chinese state-run companies to go public on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. They're buying into a company managed by Chinese bureaucrats and stuffed with Chinese assets. But these companies must pay a price in return.
They have to continuously report back to the shareholder. I think this is a very valuable discipline and experience for these companies and contribute a long way to the whole economic reform process to the point that I think it also helped to bring cultural changes in the way how Chinese companies and the management behaves. I think that this is positive.
As Hong Kong businessmen have taken their expertise into China, firms there have flocked to Hong Kong. More than 1,000 mainland companies are now based here. China has surpassed the United States and Japan as the leading investor. And the assets of the Bank of China here are enormous. But steering Hong Kong's future in the months ahead won't be easy. Helping to shape policy will be the current head of the civil service, Mrs. Anson Chan. She's held in high affection by the people of Hong Kong, and she spans the old and the new. She was top aide to the outgoing governor, and she's about to take up a similar position under the new leadership. But there's already speculation that she and other senior civil servants have more in common with their present boss than their future one.
We have a new management after 1997 in the fact that Mr. Tong will be the new chief executive, and to a very, very large extent, it will depend on what steer and what direction the chief executive gives to the civil service. Speaking on my part, I will certainly continue to do what I can to ensure that we maintain our culture, that we maintain a level playing field, that we keep corruption at bay, and that we remain open and transparent in our dealings with the public, and finally, that we hold ourselves accountable to a credible legislature.
There's another vital indicator of a free society where the Hong Kongers will be allowed to keep their freedom of expression.
I remember it was a morning I touched the soil of Hong Kong, and I just felt totally peaceful. It wasn't like, overwhelmed or thrilled, anything. It was just like peace. I knew I'd touched this land, and now I can be free.
Chai Ling was the leader of the student demonstrations on Tiananmen Square. She was on the run afterwards for 10 months. But the new Hong Kong government won't tolerate the territory becoming a subversive base.
The freedom, liberty is like the air they breathe every day. They probably don't realize how precious it is until that had been taken away. But once, the mainland China took over Hong Kong, and once people realized the space, the civil space and liberty will be taken away, it's like they can be sophisticated. That would be the time, I believe that would be the defining moment Hong Kong people have to face, that a decision had to make, like how much they were willing to pay to defend the liberty. And I believe that will be a moment defining Hong Kong's future.
The great test now lies with China's leaders and the new government here. Can they demonstrate their good faith and their own competence by maintaining a way of life and providing opportunity that the vast majority of Hong Kong people clearly demand?
The burden falls on everybody within the civil service. It falls on the chief executive, his top advisors, and it falls also on the people of Hong Kong, because I believe that in the final analysis, whether we make a success of the one country, two systems concept depends very much on the community as a whole standing united and prepared to defend their autonomies.
With me in the studio, watching events, is Steve Tsang from St Antony's College, Oxford, historian of Hong Kong. The democratic protesters outside LegCo, how seriously should we take them? How seriously do you take them?
Well, I think we should take them seriously. I think it's important that in Hong Kong and after the changeover, that people who feel that they have something to demonstrate, that they can actually demonstrate. But on the other hand, I think it's also very important for the demonstrators to know the limits. Because if they try to push the Chinese government, if they are trying to make statements which the Chinese government absolutely cannot tolerate, then they will provoke the Chinese government to make reactions that we do not want to see to happen.
I think we should remember that when Democrat candidates stand in elections, they do very well. Conceivably, it may be that not very many people will join them in the streets, but would vote for them given half a chance.
Yes, I would agree with that. I think people's feelings are quite clear. They want democracy in this town, but at the same time, I think people in Hong Kong are also very pragmatic and they are realist. They know that China will not let them have full democracy at this stage, and if they try to push it, they may in fact provoke the Chinese into reducing what they already have.
How much credit do you think that Chris Patten, whom the Chinese have called all sorts of beastly names, has for creating this spirit of democracy in Hong Kong?
I think he should be given some credit for it, but I think we should not sort of overdo it, because I think when Governor Patten came, Hong Kong was already on a trend developing for more democracy. People already wanted to have more democracy. The governor certainly gave people a feeling that they had a taste of democracy.
So the Martin Lees of this world, who we'll see later, and Emily Lau, these are genuine internal products of Hong Kong's own maturing as a society.
Yes, I would say that. They were in the scene well before Governor Patten arrived.
But still, they and he came together at the right time.
They came together at the right time, but here I think one also have to put things in perspective. I think the great achievements of Governor Patten does not really lies in giving Hong Kong a greater sense of democracy, because now we see that in fact the stage of democratic developments in Hong Kong is being rolled back.
We'll pick these things up later in the evening, Steve. Let's leave it there for the moment. Now, it's been said that the qualities that made Hong Kong successful in the past were brains, optimism, the rule of law, and more recently, that intoxicating dash of democracy. From tomorrow, the qualities that China expects are somewhat different. Love of China, patriotism, and the realization that the state determines law. As for democracy, that is an unknown quantity and could even, in some eyes, be a Western plot. All Hong Kong parties use the word, but it tends to mean different things depending on who is doing the talking, as Fergal Keane found out.
It's a place where the playing field has until now been pretty level.
Any Chelsea supporter here?
In politics as in sport, the idea is that fair play should rule, and up to now it's the Democrats who've been winners. In the colony's last elections, they won a majority of the vote, the most popular team in the game. But China is about to throw them out of office. The Democrats are angry.
We have to stand up and defend and fight for it. Otherwise, the Chinese official will do whatever they like.
The man in blue shorts is Dr. Jung Sun. To the Democrat supporters, he's a hero. He says he's not depressed about the immediate future. He believes Hong Kong will export democracy to China.
The development of democracy in Hong Kong and even in China is something the Chinese government can never stop it. Even in China, as the open economy develops, as people start to have their own private property, and people want to have more say over their own fate. So by doing so, I think even in China, more demand for political reform will come.
Hong Kong is a city driven by restless urges. Sleep is snatched in the small spaces between work and home. Here, the energy of the East and the British gift for administration created an improbable success story. For years, the British kept these streets free of politics, but in the final years of colonialism, a vibrant civil society has grown up. The democratic reforms encouraged people like Frederick Fung to become activists for grassroots concerns like housing, education and welfare. But unlike the Democrats, Mr. Fung believes in cooperating with the Chinese.
The point is, even though you don't join inside the political structure, you can't change it.
So you have to be part of it?
We think we have to be part of it, and we try to find out which is the way to generate the biggest pressure to the government to have a reform.
Do you think, though, that China is really interested in having real democracy here? Because if you've got democracy here, surely it can spread into China, and they're afraid of that.
I don't mind whether he like it or not, but we like it. Hong Kong people like it.
Travelling through Hong Kong politics, one becomes aware of a single looming reality. However much people here may like democracy, China has no intention of allowing it to continue. The rules of the race are about to be changed. Last time out, pro-China parties won a minority of seats. But under the new voting system that replaces Chris Patten's open elections, parties like Gary Cheng's Democratic Alliance will become powerful.
We, as a pro-China guys, we stand up for elections.
But the menu presented by Beijing could hardly be said to offer a full democratic choice. Gary Cheng believes the atmosphere of freedom will not only survive, but could provide a successful model for China.
We should pursue the Chinese, at the end of the day, is a democracy in China.
And democracy means ultimately one person, one vote.
Not the typical British model, but people can vote, can more open atmosphere to express their views and have a democratic system in political area or in cultural area. I would like to see that.
But the Chinese communists, who are the ultimate managers of Gary Cheng's team, have shown little love for any kind of freedom. At the end of the day, it is Beijing, not any Hong Kong party, which will keep the prize of power for itself.
Let's catch up with events in Beijing and Humphrey Hawksley. Humphrey, is the thing that really worries the Chinese leadership the prospect of, as it were, infection by democracy from Hong Kong?
I think that's true. I think they're very happy to follow the economic model of Hong Kong, but the seeping across the border and from Western countries with communications improving is seriously worrying them. And anybody that one talks to in the government, academics, about pluralism, about elections, about one man, one vote, that sort of thing, it's just simply not on the cards. They're not planning it and they don't want it.
Humphrey, do they still think that really Hong Kong is almost a Western time bomb, which has been deliberately left behind as a democratic time bomb for China?
I think that's a little bit got fudged with everything else that's happening with these ceremonies, but that is precisely why they're disbanding the Legislative Council, why they put their hand-picked man in, and why leaders have been issuing instructions to the Hong Kong people. You must love China, you must love Hong Kong, and that is your priority, not have open academic debate about where your future should go to.
Do you think that they have learned a lot about Hong Kong or anything about Hong Kong in the last few years?
I think that is the most serious problem, particularly with the people I talk to up here. They don't seem to know how it operates. They don't understand the rule of law. They don't understand a level playing field. And I think that the most dangerous thing is that they'll want to put their stamp of authority on it, but not quite know how to do it in a way that will let Hong Kong move forward successfully. Humphrey
Hawksley in Beijing, thank you very much. And let's now catch up with events at the Convention Centre, where we are getting even closer and closer to the time of the handover ceremony. Brian Hanrahan. Brian.
John, most of the hall is now filled up with the 4,000 guests, and the band of the People's Liberation Army are playing to entertain them. This is not something that Hong Kong, I think, had ever anticipated. And they're applauding the end of their music presentation, and now we switch to the band of the Scots Guards, who will play one of the British tunes. They're taking it in turns to switch from one side to the other. Every detail of this ceremony has been very carefully negotiated. The British and the Chinese bands will take their turns. The British and the Chinese MCs will make their announcements. The British and the Chinese flags will have their turn. It's all been argued over for months, and indeed the arguments continued into this evening, so that no nuance of the ceremony should favour one side over the other. Upstairs, we understand that the Prince of Wales and the Chinese President, Jiang are having a short goodwill meeting, a handshake, a small social chat, because once they come in here, it'll be formal, almost icily formal. And afterwards, there'll be no time for any kind of conversation, because the British will leave immediately, bag and baggage on Britannia. And indeed, the rest of those who are taking part in this ceremony, the bands, the honour guards, the flag lowerers, will also be out of the territory by 3 o'clock in the morning, in a couple of hours' time. And that will be the end of the British presence here in Hong Kong. All that will
For the last 6 months, the chief executive designate of Hong Kong has been Tung Chee-hwa, or C.H. Tung in the Western form. Ask who appointed him, and the answer is simple: Beijing, which is not to say that many Hong Kongers don't respect him. Tomorrow is, in his words, a glorious moment as we return to our motherland. Forced to ride 2 horses at the same time, Mr. Tung asserts that what is good for Hong Kong is good for China, but more uneasily, he says if it is good for China, it must be better for Hong Kong. For many here, there is no must about it. Joy Shan Lam spoke to the chief executive designate and asked him about his vision for Hong Kong.
Well, I hope, Joy Shan, 5 years from today, we will see a Hong Kong which is stable, which is compassionate, which is democratic. As we see a Hong Kong which is governed by rule of law. We see a Hong Kong which is proud of its new identity of being Chinese. And we see a Hong Kong which continues to be a thriving international and cosmopolitan city. And we see a Hong Kong making tremendous contribution to China's modernization.
In the past few months, the foreign media have portrayed you and Martin Lee in fairly opposite roles. You as someone who's building a bridge between Hong Kong and China, and Martin as someone who's trying to build a wall, keeping China away. Do you yourself see you and Mr. Lee playing such opposite roles?
Well, I'm not quite sure what role Mr. Lee wants to play, but I'm quite sure what I need to do. I need to lead Hong Kong forward. I need to make the whole world understand how one country, 2 system works. And also, we need to build confidence and trust between Hong Kong and mainland China. And this is really, all this is a lot of work, but all this needs to be done.
I guess there is such a portrayal because a lot of people are concerned about the relationship between Hong Kong and China.
Yes.
Do you feel you're building a bridge between the 2?
I think there is a need for improving mutual trust, mutual confidence. And I think as every day goes by, not just me, many people in Hong Kong who are committed to this are working very hard to build this relationship. And I already see a tremendous improvement. And there is a need for this because there has been 156 years of separation, and people in Hong Kong do not understand and know China well enough. So there is a need for this to be done.
You once mentioned that you're not a Communist Party member and that you do not plan to be. I was wondering, do you think a party member would be appropriate for the job of the chief executive, and whether or not you would accept a party member as your successor?
Well, I have no plans to be a party member, but the country is governed by a Communist Party. And I think if you look at the record of the last 19 years, China is moving forward very well. China is moving forward well, and the Communist Party is the governing party. Now, as far as Hong Kong is concerned, there is no plan for the Communist Party to get involved in politics, because if there is, then there's no need for one country, two systems. But as far as individual members are concerned, they can be members of any party. The important thing is for them to be committed to the well-being of Hong Kong.
Will you miss the British?
I have spent 6 years of my youth in Britain. You know, obviously, I have feelings for Britain as a nation. But I think after 156 years, it is time for Hong Kong to return to China.
During the handover ceremony, you will be with many leaders, including, of course, the mainland Chinese leaders. What do you think will be on their minds?
I think it's a moment of pride that Hong Kong is returning to China, and that also it is a moment that a period of humiliation, of despair has come to an end, and China is standing on its own again.
And how about yourself? Will you have any mixed feelings?
I feel the same, that this is the new beginning for Chinese people everywhere, and it is now up to us to build a better Hong Kong.
C.H. Tung, the Chief Executive Designate, and the ceremony of the handover will start in about 7 or 8 minutes' time at 1:45. I'm joined now by one of Hong Kong's most distinguished civil servants, Sir Jack Cater, who was widely credited with making it clear that corruption would not be tolerated in the colony. How great is the fear, how great is your fear that corruption is something that will come in with the Chinese?
I think it's almost inevitable that this is going to happen. And of course it's very important that we should take note of that and take action. But there's no doubting that in South China, in Guangdong in particular, there's a great deal of corruption going on, and that this unfortunately has spread into many areas in Guangdong. I suppose the people who are involved with that have in fact become involved with the army in Guangdong, and the army, as you know, is very much into business too.
So you think the danger is that this will carry over into Hong Kong, and the expectation of the army is that they will make their packet out of Hong Kong as they've done out of other Chinese regions?
Absolutely right. And I think this is the great worry that one must have.
And the corruption in the civil service, is that part and parcel of the same thing, or is that something distinct?
It's distinct, certainly in Hong Kong, and I think that by and large we've got corruption fairly under control.
But how strong is the Hong Kong civil service, the civil service which you in part helped to create and leave behind? Many of the Hong Kong civil service are people who, so to say, you brought up. How resilient are they?
Well, I know a lot of them, of course, and Lily Yam, the new commissioner of the ICAC, is very tough and very good. She worked with me on 2 occasions, and I know how good she is. She may not look it. Nice looking, slim, small, but she's a very determined, hard character.
So it's almost as important for the people of Hong Kong to stand up against corruption as it is to stand up for democracy.
Absolutely. Perhaps in some ways, and not only just as important, but more important.
How do you judge C.H. Tung? He says all the right things, he's clearly very personable, he's very fluent, you know him pretty well.
Yes, I've known him for a long time, knew his father well before too. Nice person, nice wife, Betty, a Cantonese girl. But very obviously, he's very much the person who's been chosen by China to, if you like, be the chief executive and governor of Hong Kong.
So as far as you're concerned, he has to prove himself that he is a real Hong Konger.
Absolutely. I think he probably wants to be, but undoubtedly too, he has his masters in Beijing who may wish to push him in different directions.
So Jack, we'll see who pushes whom in what directions. Thank you very much. Well, 700 years ago, a Chinese magician and poet had a vision of Hong Kong ablaze with a host of stars in the deep night and 10,000 ships passing to and fro within the harbour. Earlier this evening, Victoria Harbour, that great deep-water anchorage that started 156 years of history, was indeed ablaze with stars, the stars of a vast fireworks display. It was a cracking display, and the Chinese have promised even more tomorrow, competitive fireworks. Well, the very last few minutes of British rule, the handover ceremony is about to start, so let's join Brian Hanrahan at the Convention Centre. Brian.
And the formal ceremony here in the hall has just got underway with the announcers. There is one Chinese and one British explaining who is about to come onto the stage. There are as many meanings to this ceremony as there are people attending it, whether it is a celebration or a sadness, whether it is a surrender or a handover. And in order to accommodate those very many different meanings, it is a very simple ceremony. Here, waiting in the wings, are the Chinese leadership about to come onto the stage and take possession of Hong Kong. Jiang Zemin is on the right. Li Peng, the Prime Minister, is just to his right. And now the announcements are being repeated in Chinese in order that everybody should understand what's going on. At midnight, the announcements will switch, and the first announcements after midnight will be made in Chinese and followed in English. It is a very carefully balanced event. Tung Chee-hwa, waiting, the new chief executive, waiting to come out as the fifth member. There are 5 from the British and 5 from the Chinese side who will come onto the stage in a moment to take their place in front of the platform parties who already consist of the official delegations. And as the British Guard of Honour march on, so does the PLA Guard of Honour. This is the first official appearance of the People's Liberation Army in Hong Kong. This is the special color guard which has been brought down from Beijing, which normally meets in Tiananmen Square to greet dignitaries. And they've been brought here for the occasion to show that the Chinese can match the best of British drill. They've told the British commander that the PLA would like to soften its image here in Hong Kong, and they're trying to project a more friendly image than the one that most Hong Kong people have of them, and to change the image of Tiananmen from that site of the massacre to something which becomes the center of Chinese life. On the left of the platform are the official Chinese representatives. On the right are the official British representatives.
All please stand for the arrival of the principal representatives. 双方主要领导人入场，请全体起立。
That fanfare, composed by the Chinese, was called Moment of Victory. The British fanfare, which will be played later, is called The Victors. So Jiang Zemin leads the Chinese official party onto the stage. The Prince of Wales leads the British party, and they will take their places, ready for this ceremony, which will climax with the handover of sovereignty at midnight Hong Kong time. It brings, of course, Mr. Patton face to face with those who have, over the last 5 years, vilified him, accused him of being a prostitute, a whore, a tango dancer, and they have refused to meet him.
Please be seated. 请坐下.
As you can see, the hall, which is the newest building in Hong Kong, the second largest gathering space in Asia, is packed with people, although only about a third of them will be allowed to go on to attend the Chinese ceremonies later. And the first event will be a speech from the Prince of Wales.
President Jiang Zemin, Premier Li Peng, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, this important and special ceremony marks a moment of both change and continuity in Hong Kong's history. It marks, first of all, the restoration of Hong Kong to the People's Republic of China under the terms of the Sino-British Joint Declaration of 1984, after more than 150 years of British administration. This ceremony also celebrates continuity because, by that same treaty and the many subsequent agreements which have been made to implement its provisions, the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region will have its own government and retain its own society, its own economy, and its own most of all, I should like to pay tribute to the people of Hong Kong themselves for all that they have achieved in the last century and a half. The triumphant success of Hong Kong demands and deserves to be maintained. Hong Kong has shown the world how dynamism and stability can be defining characteristics of a successful society. These have together created a great economy which is the envy of the world. Hong Kong has shown the world how East and West can live and work together. As a flourishing commercial and cultural crossroads, it has brought us together and enriched all our lives. 13 years ago, the governments of the United Kingdom and the People's Republic of China recognized in the joint declaration that these special elements which have created a crucial condition for Hong Kong's success should continue. They agreed that in order to maintain that success, Hong Kong should have its own separate trading and financial system, should enjoy autonomy and an elected legislature, should maintain its laws and liberty, and should be run by the people of Hong Kong and be accountable to them. Those special elements have served Hong Kong well over the past 2 decades. Hong Kong has coped with the challenges of great economic, social, and political transition with almost none of the disturbance and dislocation which in other parts of the world have so often accompanied change on such a scale. The United Kingdom has been proud and privileged to have had responsibility for the people of Hong Kong, to have provided a framework of opportunity in which Hong Kong has so conspicuously succeeded, and to have been part of the success which the people of Hong Kong have made of their own opportunities. In a few moments, the United Kingdom's responsibilities will pass to the People's Republic of China. Hong Kong will thereby be restored to China, and within the framework of one country, two systems, it will continue to have a strong identity of its own and be an important international partner for many countries in the world. Ladies and gentlemen, China will tonight take responsibility for a place and a people which matter greatly to us all. The solemn pledges made before the world in the 1984 Joint Declaration guarantee the continuity of Hong Kong's way of life. For its part, the United Kingdom will maintain its unwavering support for the Joint Declaration. Our commitment and our strong links to Hong Kong will continue and will, I am confident, flourish as Hong Kong and its people themselves continue to flourish. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I should like, on behalf of Her Majesty the Queen and of the entire British people, to express our thanks, admiration, affection, and good wishes to all the people of Hong Kong who have been such staunch and special friends over so many generations. We shall not forget you, and we shall watch with the closest interest as you embark on this new era of your remarkable history.
Prince Charles turning away, he was very careful in that speech to spell out what it is that China has agreed to over Hong Kong and what it is that Britain will expect China to do.
For the flag ceremony. 降旗升旗仪式现在开始，请全体起立。
And now the British party come in order to lower the British flag, and the People's Liberation Army arrive with Hong Kong's destiny in their hands, the flag of the People's Republic of China, which will be raised just after midnight. From now on, everything will be timed with great precision. The flag is presented to the platform party, President Jiang, Prime Minister Li Peng. And what will happen is that first they will take down the British and the Hong Kong flags while the British national anthem is played. There will be 1 second of silence at midnight, and then they will raise the Chinese and the new Hong Kong flag to the Chinese national anthem. And it is the Hong Kong police who will have the task of lowering and raising the two Hong Kong flags. As they come in, if we look carefully, we will notice that they are wearing different insignia. Those on the British side are wearing the insignia of the Royal Hong Kong Police, which is the force as it is now. Those carrying the new Hong Kong flag have already changed to the insignia of the new Special Administrative Region of Hong Kong, the Bohemia, which replaces the crown and the insignia of the Queen. There's been much care in making sure that this ceremony climaxes at precisely midnight. There will be...
The Union flag and the Hong Kong flag will now be lowered, and the national flag of the People's Republic of China and the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region flag will be raised.
During the handover, nothing will actually be handed over. There will be no keys or documents exchanged, just a momentary pause between the two national anthems. And in that pause, Lieutenant Colonel David Price of the Scots Guards will salute his opposite number, and he will salute the moment of history. And a great round of applause From the audience here, all the important people in Hong Kong reached the first sight of their new flag with the Bauhinia flower, the symbol of Hong Kong, flying against a red background. So history has come full circle. Hong Kong, taken from a weak Chinese empire, is returned to a powerful and slowly improving China. Britain's centuries as a great Asian power are ended, but not extinguished. Britain's legacy remains in this huge and bustling city, a massive monument to an economic and political system that neither Britain nor China could achieve by themselves. The dynamism that has kept Hong Kong moving will now have to adapt to the changes that will follow this, probably the largest change in its history. The very sparse ceremonial reflects the Chinese view that they never lost sovereignty. They merely temporarily stopped resuming it.
Please be seated.
And
now we are going to hear Jiang Zemin, the President of the People's Republic of China, the first Chinese leader ever to come to Hong Kong, who's waited until he comes in what in Chinese eyes is a moment of victory and celebration. And there'll be a great deal of interest in what he has to say at this moment for the future of Hong Kong.
查尔斯王子、布莱尔首相、尊敬的各位嘉宾、女士们、先生们，中华人民共和国国旗和中华人民共和国香港特别行政区区旗已在香港庄严升起。此时此刻，世界各国人民都把目光投向香港。根据中英关于香港问题的联合声明，两国政府如期举行了香港交接仪式，宣告中国对香港恢复行使主权，中华人民共和国香港特别行政区正式成立。这是中华民族的盛事，也是世界和平与正义事业的胜利。1997年7月1日这一天，将作为值得人们永远纪念的
July the 1st, he says, will go down in the annals of history as a day that merits eternal memory. Now he's praising Deng Xiaoping for originating the concept of one country and two systems, which Hong Kong will follow. And he says it is this concept which has achieved the smooth return, and he's paying tribute to those who contributed to it. There was Deng Xiaoping's widow watching on, and Mr. Jiang is saying that the peaceful negotiations set a new model for the solution of all international disputes. And Mr. Jiang will be thinking particularly of Taiwan when he talks of this.
Mr. Jiang is welcoming the international support for the return of Hong Kong to its motherland, and he says that on this solemn occasion he expresses his congratulations to the 6 million compatriots, Chinese compatriots in Hong Kong, who he says have returned to the embrace of the motherland. Mr. Jiang says that there will be unswerving observation of the principle of one country, two systems, with the Hong Kong people having the right to administer themselves with a high degree of autonomy and maintaining their own way of life. Hong Kong, he says, will be unchanged in its laws, and after the return of Hong Kong, the government will keep its current laws and ensure the rights and protections of Hong Kong residents. And he says there will be a gradual development of a democratic system that suits the Hong Kong reality. Mr. Jiang has talked about it as a free port, international trade and shipping center, and that it will be allowed to go on maintaining separate ties, economic and cultural, with other countries. It will not be part of China as far as these matters are concerned. And Mr. Jiang, he says, he hopes the return of Hong Kong will make a fresh start for Britain and China so that they may expand their cooperation in other fields in future. And Mr. Jiang hopes that those who come here to watch the ceremony, who are responsible for trading interests, will continue to contribute to Hong Kong's prosperity. And he says that Hong Kong's prosperity has been built by the Hong Kong people with the staunch support of the People's Republic of China. And he finishes by saying that the Hong Kong compatriots, in other words the people of Hong Kong, will be allowed to manage Hong Kong. Those are the words that the people here in the hall wanted to hear, an assurance that the agreement struck with Britain will be kept, and that Mr. Jiang intends to keep other Chinese officials away from Mr. Tung and allow him to govern Hong Kong with the help of local people in the way that Hong Kong has always been governed. I think the warm applause which we heard suggests just how welcome those words were and how much they will be listened to in China as well as in Hong Kong, where many officials will be wondering what their attitude should be. And that concludes the ceremony. And I do believe that Mr. Jiang is showing off his knowledge of English there, chatting away with Prince Charles. And I think they're posing for photographs. A little sentiment has crept into this rather stark ceremony. Now it's all over. They're beginning to relax. The tension is fading away. All the right things have been said. And the future, we'll see what really happens. The British, of course, are going to depart with dignified haste immediately to Britannia and sail away. They will not stay for the formal swearing in of the Chinese appointed legislature, which is taking place in this same building in just over an hour's time. Britain, of course, says that that is improper. Mr. Blair has had one meeting already to talk about the harder political issues. Now shakes hands with Miss Jiang. And there's Li Peng talking to Sir Charles Guthrie, who is the Chief of the Defence Staff. And now they're breaking up and walking swiftly away into the wings. A ceremony of utter simplicity. And Prince Charles is talking to the Chinese Foreign Minister, Chan Chi-chen, as they make their way out of this enormous building, this huge building which has been put up here on the Hong Kong waterfront, the symbol of Hong Kong's bustling prosperity, which everybody is determined shall continue. Each side will regard this event in their own way. Will it be a triumph or a failure, sadness or joy, stability or uncertainty? Prosperity is the one talisman to which everybody holds. The British argue that economic success is brought about by political freedom, and they've argued that point strongly to the Chinese. And we did hear some reassurance there from President Jiang that democracy will be allowed to develop, but according, he says, in an appropriate fashion for Hong Kong. Prince Charles coming down the escalators in order to join the Governor's Rolls-Royce. No longer the Governor's Rolls-Royce, of course, but simply the Chief Executive's Rolls-Royce, which will be waiting to take him away on loan. He is now a visitor in the Chinese territory of Hong Kong. And back here in the hall, the People's Liberation Army are marching out, being warmly applauded. This is a Quicksilver place where people adjust according to what they see as the political realities of the present. They do not waste time on the past. And they will, of course, now turn to their new masters and adjust to continuing to make Hong Kong a success with Chinese characteristics expressed in a full Chinese way.
Those seated on the stage and those in the grand hall who are invited to go to the quayside for the departure of His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales will now leave. Would the rest of the audience please
and as the official party make their way out, back here the audience are being divided like sheep and goats. Those that are fit to go on to the Chinese ceremony, those that the Chinese have selected to attend the swearing in of the new chosen Legislative Council, and those who are not, those who have been excluded and will now have to start again, because there is a reordering of both political and economic priorities here, and people will learn to adjust themselves if they want to make their way in the future. Those are the international guests. Many of them have decided they will go. They will not join the British and the American boycott. Madeleine Albright, who's in there, will be leaving with the British. But the others have decided they will go on and they will attend the Chinese swearing-in ceremony, although Britain has been trying to persuade them that they should not do so. And here the final farewells are being said outside this great convention hall. Tung Chee-hwa, who has said that he will probably visit Britain in October, shaking hands warmly with the governor. No longer the governor. I keep getting it wrong here. But Mr. Patton, who is no longer the governor of Hong Kong, leaves with a smile and a handshake, which is rather better than he's received over much of the time that he's been here. Hong Kong now has a new master and will have to discover how best to live with him. I wonder if I can recall something that was said to me when this agreement was first signed 13 years ago by somebody who lived in Hong Kong. He said, when the Chinese come, we will first insinuate ourselves with them, and then we will subvert them to our way of life. It'll be a race over the next 50 years, whether China becomes more like Hong Kong or Hong Kong becomes more like China.
And of course the next stage in today's events will be the departure of the British leaders in the Royal Yacht Britannia. Eric Robson is there looking, watching that scene, so let's go over to him now. Eric.
This sparkling conference centre, like so much of Hong Kong's waterfront, has been reclaimed from the deep waters of the anchorage in Victoria Harbour, where British ships first found shelter 150 and more years ago. One wonders what Prince Charles's architectural view of this sparkling convention centre might be. Last time he was in Hong Kong, one of his official duties was opening an arts centre, not so many blocks away, which held in such regard in Hong Kong that it's usually described as a cross between a concrete blockhouse and a rather indifferent dry ski slope. We wait now for the official cars to take the short journey from the conference centre that sparkles over the harbour waters to come along towards Tamar, where there'll be a small welcoming party before they board the Royal Yacht.
And we'll be covering those events as they leave in a few minutes' time. Let us now go back to Beijing and hear from Humphrey Hawksley there, how the momentous change has been greeted there. Humphrey, it's only a few minutes into China's ownership, repossession of Hong Kong. What sort of response has there been so far? Has there been anything in Tiananmen Square?
There were certainly no divisions of loyalty here, as the British flag was watched by tens of thousands of people here going down on giant television screens. A huge cheer was let off throughout the square, and then there was a massive firework display, and everybody, the policemen who were on guard and the performers who were out for the all-night ceremony, there seemed to be a genuine sentiment that they had lost this territory, that they seemed to be so embittered about having lost 150 years ago.
And those are the pictures that Humphrey Hawksley was talking about, the fireworks and the celebrations in Beijing at the moment when, as far as they're concerned, Chinese unity was recovered. So, Humphrey, the people behind you, there are an awful lot of people there. I think most of them are official, but it's not just an official gathering, is it?
Well, it is an official gathering, but there are so many people that, of course, even China can't have a completely unified sentiment here. But they're divided into 3 or 4 groups of line dancers, drum dancing, people doing hula hoops. The dragons have been weaving in and out of the square for some time. And then the Hong Kong clock is now, as I'm looking at it, there are 2 zeros there. And there are sort of choral patriotic songs and dances going on behind me. The big event, though, really is going to be tomorrow when President Jiang and the most senior Chinese leaders come back from Hong Kong. There's going to be more fireworks and festivities in a stadium here, but they're going to address the Chinese people. And a lot of people here are saying it's the most significant event for this country since the Communist Party came to power in 1949. So they see it really, and President Jiang will be in a way, it'll be a test for his leadership and his vision as to whether he can keep forward keep on with the economic reforms, but not let the other aspirations of people here get out of control. They're already being reflected in Hong Kong, as we've been seeing, and it's going to be noted over the next 5 or 10 years as the wealth begins to spread, whether people are going to want the sort of freedoms that they're going to increasingly see people in Hong Kong and other parts of East Asia getting.
Hawksley in Beijing in Tiananmen Square, where the celebrations are taking place, both official and semi-official. Let's leave it there and back to Hong Kong, where the royal cars have now moved much closer to Britannia. Eric Robertson is at East Tamar looking at the scene there.
The cars on their short journey, just perhaps a quarter of a mile along the harbour front, and not through the prettiest part of Hong Kong at that. Past a multi-storey car park and a helipad, past the Fleet Arcade, a shopping centre for United States carriers. The cars passing between extraordinary water-filled crowd control barriers, not best designed to enhance the view. I'm sure these are not Chris Patten's favourite parts of Hong Kong. We know that he was a man who loved touring the street markets. He loved eating out in the fine restaurants here. Some of his best friends in Hong Kong were restaurateurs, shopkeepers, people he met when he visited outlying parts of the colony. He was a great man of the people. So many of the 27 governors that preceded him actively disliked Hong Kong, couldn't wait to get away from it. I'm sure that the sentiments will be entirely different in Mr. Patten's mind tonight. He and his family loved the place. It will be with great sorrow that they're leaving. But official Hong Kong has passed away now for Chris Patten, and his is now a family departure. Not a complete family departure. Whiskey and soda, the beloved government house dogs, have gone on ahead to the house in France, where the Pattens will spend some time before moving back to England. Chris Patten spending time writing a book about his experiences here. It'll be a revealing document. As the official cars draw up on the quayside at East Tamar, there's a lineup of friends and working colleagues from Government House and from other contacts in Hong Kong, waiting to say goodbye to the governor. If you were watching earlier at East Tamar, you'll remember the affection of the man who was known as Fat Pang, who loved the nickname, the reaction he achieved when he'd finished his speech here. I've got to say that in recent minutes after the handover to China, the audience at the Canto Pop Festival, who are still singing away in the arena at East Tamar, they're waving to Chris Patten, waving the ex-governor and the Prince of Wales away, but when the flag of the Special Administrative Region was raised, they cheered. Many friends being left behind. And tonight's a night for friendship. Tomorrow's soon enough to begin unpicking the political destiny, as no doubt they will, They'll want to know how successful Chris Patten was in his 5 years here as the 28th governor. I'm reminded of the when Chou En-lai was once asked if the French Revolution had been a good thing or a bad thing. He said it was too early to tell, and I think that perhaps in many ways that's going to be the same with Chris Patten's legacy as the last governor. For the moment, though, it's handshakes and embraces for this man who embedded himself in the life of this colony so deeply. And the band of the Royal Marines strike up as Prince Charles makes his way down the line, talking to ex-Governor Patten's friends as well. His Royal Highness obviously enjoying this bit of the visit a great deal more than he did with the drenching he had at East Timor during his speech. I'm sure that in the newsprints in the next day or two, there will be those who will be reading the runes about why the heavens opened precisely at the moment that he began to deliver the message from Her Majesty the Queen. Chris Patten, the dedicated family man. It was noticeable during his speech at East Timor that when he was talking about his successor, he actually wished C.H. Tung and his wife Betty well, and said that he was sure they would have the dedication and strength and enthusiasm to carry out the job. Can the governor have missed a handshake along the way? No, I think that he was perhaps having a message passed on to him. And so many friends have turned up to say goodbye. They've lived through the depressing times of Chris Patten's governorship, those years of uncertainty when they were worried about what was going to happen to Hong Kong, wondering quite how serious the Chinese takeover would be. There have been many reassuring things said this evening in Hong Kong between the downpours. But certainly, if a mark of the man is the way that he has been taken to the heart of a place, then what Chris Patten has done here thoroughly deserves to work. A man who managed to live in the grandeur of Government House without snobbery, who managed to carry out a job of great responsibility and considerable power without letting it go to his head. Always blunt, always to the point, always straight from the shoulder. I'm not sure if you can hear it or not, but Prince Charles is being serenaded from beyond the barriers across the road in the arena here at East Timor. Marvellous. And for all the awful things that were said about what was going to happen tonight, there's so much happiness around. Here Chris Patten's daughters saying farewell to friends as well. And everywhere there are smiles. But not just in this official party beside the Royal Yacht. We were told it was going to be such a serious night, such a serious moment of a change of pace. Somehow the pulse, the breath of Hong Kong would be halted for a second at midnight. But it hasn't happened that way. There have been cheers and smiles and laughter on this side of the barrier as well. There was Mrs. Patten joining her husband in his farewells. On the left, Alice, who went to school here in Hong Kong. The other two daughters, Kate and Laura. Alice, the youngest, she's 17. The others in their 20s. Taking the short passage to Manila with their parents on the Royal Yacht. Also joining on the board will be two of Chris Patten's personal advisors who came out with him from the UK. Martin Dinham and Edward Llewellyn will leave on the yacht too. The band playing Now Is the Hour. Almost the moment to leave these friends goodbye. William Hague and his fiancée saying their goodbyes. Chris Patten, of course, once in an earlier incarnation, a leading light in the organisation of the Tory party, which William Hague is now attempting to lead to unity. Douglas Hurd, ex-Foreign Secretary. John Binks. But friendships and close attachments across the political divides. This was such an important job. When Chris Patten lost his seat in Bath, he was looking for a challenge. And by goodness, he got one. A challenge which he carried off with immense aplomb. Francis Cornish, Consul General. It's a good job that the Royal Yacht doesn't have to have a departure slot from Victoria Harbour, because I think she'll be leaving late. That's Laura Patten in the foreground. This has been, in some ways, a very comforting evening. There just has been so much goodwill from all sides. And I think that, you know, whatever people's view about the sovereignty issue, people on all sides respect what Chris Patten, the way that Chris Patten has been received in Hong Kong. They may disagree with some of the ways he did things. As he said a day or two ago, he's been portrayed at times as a sort of Asiatic Rambo. He doesn't see himself that way at all, and there certainly don't seem to be any signs of that tonight. And everywhere he turns, there's someone else who's turned up by surprise. Some of the family going aboard. Just a goodbye to David Tang. Hugh Davis just behind the ex-governor, just to his left now. Many hundreds of people here in the arena at East Tamar have stayed on for this moment to watch the departure of Chris Patten and the Prince of Wales and the Royal Yacht. The main pop concert finished, an hour and 10 minutes ago. But they were told that they could stay on, that there'll be buses to take them home if they want to stay. So they've stayed on in their hundreds to watch this final moment of British departure. Lavender Patten just about to come aboard. Final word from Robin Cook, Foreign Secretary, as Prince Charles and Chris Patten mount the brow. And in the arena here, everyone who stayed is on their feet, whistling and cheering, wishes of goodwill. And this, perhaps, is the moment that the leaving of Hong Kong will hit him. The family, obviously overcome, so many friends left behind. A final, decisive Patten wave as they go aboard. It'll take some 10 minutes for Her Majesty's Royal Yacht to be tugged away from the quay at East Tamar and out into the main water of the harbour.
And if Hong Kong's Democrats want to learn a thing or two about how to handle people, how to deal with the crowd, then Chris Patten has shown there that he has forgotten none of his political skills, and it'll be very surprising if they don't come back into use in the very near future. So what, in the meantime, are Hong Kong's own Democrats up to around the LegCo building? They've been promising demonstrations, promising speeches. Let's go over to Joy Shan Lam and hear what's going on there.
We're hearing wild response from the crowds at the moment because there are 19 Democratic legislators standing on the balcony of the LegCo building, among them Martin Lee, who's been attending the official ceremony. They are now talking about one country, two systems, and supporting their sovereignty while defending democracy. They are repeating the slogans, and the crowds are quite responsive. Before, they had been doing satirical dramas and singing a lot of democratic songs with rock bands, and the legislators singing as well. So we'll be back with an update later. Back to you, John.
So Hong Kong's Democrats are there at it. Steve Tang, you are, after all, a Hong Konger. Here you are. The status has changed. What do you feel?
Well, I think a certain sadness, I think, to see the end of empire, to see the end of British presence in Hong Kong. I think the way how people have been greeting the governor represents the way how people feel about the governor, but also the fact that he represents the British presence and the British record. I think the warmth that people have demonstrated was for Patton as much as it was for the British record here.
It is quite an achievement. Let's just go back to Jiang Zemin's speech, because there are a couple of things that particularly stuck out. And he made a reference, which both of us noted, the democratic system in Hong Kong that suits Hong Kong reality. Now, that is a very Chinese formulation and not altogether a reassuring one, is it?
You're quite right. I think that basically confirms what one always suspects of the Chinese government's policy, which is that Hong Kong can have democracy, insofar as democracy in Hong Kong will not in any way pose as a challenge to either Communist Party dominance within China or the Communist Party's dominance in Hong Kong. That's basically the bottom line, and the President confirmed it this evening.
Because a Western view would be that Hong Kong reality is what we have had, and that they were moving towards a Western-style democracy, but clearly the Chinese have a different view of what the Hong Kong reality will be in the future.
Absolutely. I think one has to understand the Chinese policy. The one country, two systems policy was designed to further Chinese national interests, not Hong Kong national interests. That's the basic parameter. Democracy can only work within that framework.
Now, there was another phrase of the Chinese president's which drew your attention, and you thought that his references to the Prince of Wales were rather not quite as polite as they might be. Now, tell me, what did you read into how President Jiang Zemin referred to the Prince of Wales?
Well, it struck me in the sense that he addressed the Prince as simply Prince of Wales, without any other adjective. I think he could have, and he used the Chinese term, which means an ordinary prince, rather than the crown prince, the heir, the future king of England, the Persian representative of the Queen. I think if he had wanted to, he could have been slightly more polite.
You don't think you're reading too much into that, or, well, I suppose you're skilled at reading Chinese documents and Chinese statements, and those were words that were not used carelessly, you're saying?
Well, if we are talking about a country, a people who would make sure that the PLA troops will march without making a mistake with 1 millimeter, I think when they make a statement, you watch very carefully. But of course, I think the real meaning of what President Jiang did was to send a signal to the rest of China that China has stood up. I think that's really what he wants to do. I don't think it was intended so much as a deliberate insult to Britain as to reassure his people that he is now more than on equal terms with Britain.
When you looked at the way that the leaders mingled afterwards, there was a certain sense of relaxation, didn't you think? A readiness to shake hands, there was no standoffishness there. That surely is reassuring, at least in the short term.
Yes, I think that probably would suggest that the Chinese feel that it's now over. We have re-established our authorities in Hong Kong. We have reversed the history. We have reversed the record. Now we are the top dog. We can feel at ease.
Steve, thank you very much indeed. Well, Britannia, the last minutes of Britannia in Hong Kong are almost with us, so let's hear from Eric Robson what's going down at the harbour side.
And this is what they call Procedure Alpha. The ceremonial departure with the bands playing. The escort, HMS Chatham, has already pulled away from the harbour side, is out in midstream. Britannia, controlled by Commodore Tony Morrow, will be tugged away from the quay by the two tugs Lam Tung and Tung Lung. This was Chatham that earlier today fired the 21-gun salute along the quayside at East Tamar. I was reminded of the time when the guns of Chatham were reverberating across this scene, that an earlier Chatham got carried away whilst celebrating the birthday of Queen Victoria and actually managed to sink a war junk in Victoria Harbour. Britannia, this glorious and particularly beautiful old lady from another age. The Royal Yacht Band playing as they leave the quay. And there's now obviously the farewell party breaking out on board. She is moving away from the quay. She's not a modern ship. She was born in 1953, launched by Her Majesty the Queen at Clydebank. The family waving to their friends ashore and to the many hundreds of people who are still here in the arena at Tamar. Britannia decked out in all her finery. I remember an officer on Britannia saying that the way that Her Majesty's yacht looks as she leaves or enters port is her principal weapons system, which is why they get through about 270 litres of white paint on every trip. And to the rail comes Chris Patton and the Prince of Wales. And it's so appropriate that they should be leaving by sea, because this is a place of the sea, made by the sea. Hong Kong and the other 235 islands of what was once British Hong Kong territory are also inextricably linked to the maritime trade. Mrs. Patton joins her husband at the rail. The stretch of water that they're moving out into is one of the busiest in the world. 120 merchant ships a day pass this way, 42,000 a year. And not a one of them is as pretty as Britannia. And in a way, they're sailing back into history, because this 12,400-acre sea channel, which we called Victoria Harbour, and through which sails Britannia this morning, is the basis of Hong Kong's future. The slow turn that will take Britannia out close to the convention centre where the handover took place. A shake of the head and a sturdy wave of the hand. perhaps summing up the conflicting emotions of this departure. And this is the view of the family friends, the crowds that have gathered on the Tamar Quay from Britannia as she sails away on her voyage to Manila. Britannia, part ship, part royal residence, part floating theatre. She's conducted almost 80 state visits in her 44 years, travelled 1.25 million miles. And she can have seen very few departures quite so emotional as this one. As she turns, she faces Kowloon side, one of the most crowded places on earth, a population density of 250,000 people to the square mile in parts. And she glides away from the glass canyons of Hong Kong. She'll probably never return. Her future is uncertain, in a way that Hong Kong hopes that theirs is not. Britannia, the only ship in the British Navy that doesn't carry her name on bow and stern, flying the Union flag, the Trinity House Jack, the Prince of Wales standard. She sails out into the waters where British Hong Kong was born. Out into a harbour where once you'd have seen the massive Indian trader Hormanji Bormanji loaded to the gunwales with Jardine Matheson produce, some of it opium, riding at anchor. Where too you would once have seen the old Tamar, after which the naval base here was named. The Tamar for many years was the Navy receiving ship in Hong Kong. In fact, from 1874 until she was sunk during the Second World War. And she sails out past a quayside that, when it was first auctioned by the British in the 1840s, was sold for £10 a foot. Urban plots, £20 an acre. The site she's left, the filled-in dockyard at Tamar, if its new owners choose to sell it for building, will probably be one of the most prestigious and expensive pieces of real estate anywhere on the globe. Also accompanying Britannia on this voyage to Manila, the ships of the Hong Kong Squadron. There are only 3 of them left, Peacock and Plover and Starling. But as the British depart from Hong Kong, they too are being sold to the Philippines Navy. Chris Patten reminded us in his speech this afternoon that the Pearl River estuary, of which this is part, has been a trading route of world importance for 1,000 years. Our time of tenure at Hong Kong merely allowed the people here to build on previous experience. We put up the scaffolding, as Chris Patten said, and my goodness, what they did with that bamboo scaffolding. Britannia escorted out by the Hong Kong Harbour Police. And this is the view from Britannia as she passes the convention centre, where the historic lowering of the flag happened at midnight. In a sense, as Britannia sails away, she takes with her a special cargo, a century and a half of history. In his speech earlier, Chris Patten said that at this distance none of us would seek to condone what we did 150 years ago. But let another champion of British history have the last word this morning. When Rudyard Kipling came here, he asked why everyone in Hong Kong smells of money, concluded that the island is going ahead mightily because everything pays. That's its security. That's Hong Kong, whichever flag is flying.
And even Chris Patten's critics must say that nothing became him in his governorship like the leaving of it. Hong Kong at almost 1 o'clock in the morning, under Chinese rule, under communist rule. In about an hour's time, the new Legislative Council will be sworn in. The previous British Council has been abolished. The new one has not been elected. Britain and the United States regard it as invalid. So do Hong Kong's Democrats, people like Martin Lee, and he'll be staging his own protest sometime in the next hour. Power changes, politics go on. For the highlights of this extraordinary day and the latest on events still happening, join us in an hour's time at 7 o'clock. For the moment, goodbye from Hong Kong.